The story begins with a young man telling the boy that he has been hiding for so long, but he finally found his house. And in this post-apocalyptic world, there is no such thing as a civilized society. It's the law of the jungle, and he asks if he understands. The girl says that she herself is just a weak woman, that she can only rely on the strongest, and asks him not to blame her. A voice asks what he will do until plasma splatters. Age of Ice 28 weeks earlier, human nature itself is frozen in this ice. Someone walks, an old man about to be frozen. Then another person walks with clothes prepared against the cold. The boy takes off his hood and sighs, saying it seems this place has not yet been explored, and thinks that food and fuel, which were once easy to obtain, have become extremely precious, and says the ice there is thin enough, it should be safe. The place begins to shake. The boy looks frightened, wondering if it's an earthquake. This frozen world is like God telling them that human civilization is as fragile as ice, vulnerable even to a single breath. He begins to fall and thinks he'll lose his life at this rate and not to break. The boy tries to stab his sword into the ice to stop himself, but he can't at all until he falls, and says luckily there was the snow below. If it had been ice, he himself would have become ham, and asks how that old saying goes. It's escaping a great disaster, and so it must be. What is most alarming in this frozen world is a creature called White Skin, devouring humans. And there's one right in front of him. The boy asks if he's lucky. He starts running, thinking this luck wasn't worth it. The White Skin keeps running toward him. The boy thinks this is a disaster, until a sharp chunk of ice falls, striking the creature's head and piercing through it, killing it. The boy asks if the stalactites fell because of all the noise, and says that either way it saved his life, until he looks up and says, "This isn't good." Snow starts to fall. The boy is struck, saying he'll be buried alive. Later, his body is completely covered in snow, only his arm visible. A small creature watches him and begins releasing lightning. The boy's eyes widen, and one of his eyes looks different from the other. He asks what just happened, and why he is daydreaming there. On the back of his neck is a symbol, but the protagonist thinks it's best to forget and says he's been out long enough, and it's best to go back soon. At least today he won't return empty-handed. He keeps walking until he opens a manhole and throws down a rope, thinking that since most of the city is frozen, the only way home is through this passage, day after day, not knowing how long this kind of life will last. Compared to the outside, the situation inside the building is also very bad. People are all covered up and still very cold. The boy walks, passing them, thinking that when the disaster struck, many people were trapped in this building. And now, with the scarce supplies, he doesn't dare imagine what these people will do. In this apocalyptic world, no one can guarantee they won't cross that line. It seems that guy didn't just start patrolling today, and he has to get home quickly. The protagonist knocks on the door. A girl opens and hugs him. The boy says she opened the door so quickly and calls her Xiao Ming. She keeps hugging him and says she just wanted to see him faster, and asks if he doesn't want to see her faster. The protagonist replies that he does. Of course he does. But she also has to lock the door carefully. Xiao says yes, and asks if locking the door is more important than his girlfriend. The boy shows a chocolate and says to look at what he brought. Ming asks what it is and if it's chocolate. She hugs him and says he's the best, and asks if it's just one. The protagonist replies that for only one, he almost lost his life to monsters, so she better hurry and eat it. Xiao just stares at him. Later, the boy sits in front of the fire, undecided about what to do, since it's been several days since he found decent food, and thinks about the seeds he collected before, wondering if they'll have to eat them today. And the protagonist keeps thinking that the situation with the seeds they planted before is not very optimistic. If they eat the seeds, there will be no hope in the end, and says that if it goes on like this, everyone will go mad. If the flesh of those monsters wasn't poisonous, the people in this building wouldn't have to endure hunger in those guys. On the bright side, at least the fat from those monsters is good fuel. At least in this frozen world, they won't freeze all the way through. He looks at the calendar and the time, and asks if today is Valentine's Day since he really forgot. The boy walks to the room and apologizes, saying he forgot today was Valentine's Day, until he realizes she's not there, and looks at the door thinking that sign is his girlfriend, and wondering why she went outside and what she's doing, until the protagonist opens the door and is struck, falling to the ground as he is attacked by a big guy who says Merry Christmas, and calls him Brother Mo. The big guy is hugging Ming and asks if he is surprised, unexpected. The wounded boy asks why she betrayed him and why she followed Luo Delong. Xiao asks how he dares to ask that and if he thinks he can fool her with a piece of chocolate, and says not to think she doesn't know he's been hiding all the food with such a big bag, asking if he brought air, lying even to his girlfriend, and still calling himself human. Luo slams a piece of equipment on the ground and says that as companions, he feels sorry for him and that he can give him a warning. There is no such thing as a civilized society in this post-apocalyptic world. It's the law of the jungle, and asks if he understood, saying he can't even support his own woman, and what woman would be begging to follow him. and says that weaklings have two choices: either depend on the strong or get preyed on by the weak, and tells him to hand over the food. The injured protagonist asks where there is any food. Dalong says it seems he refuses to depend on the strong, so he can only be preyed on by the weak. Mo asks what he's going to do, until he is struck on the leg, then on the face, then on the arm. All the men there start beating him without stopping, and one of the henchmen says they searched the whole house and only found rotten corn. Luo says weaklings are also meat. They don't get to choose food, and tells them to hand him the knife. Dalong takes the knife and cuts him. It happened that in the end, the outcome the protagonist least wanted to see came true, unwillingly. If there were another life, he wants to live, to survive, until in another place, someone is lying on a table and widens his eyes, calling for Luo Dalong, and the protagonist is confused, wondering what is going on. Didn't he just lose his life? Why is he completely unscathed? Meanwhile, 28 hours left before the global ice age. Protests in Queens continue. The city's police department was dispatched with a large-scale police force to maintain order. The elites of Manhattan are enjoying an exclusive party. The gangs of Brooklyn are conducting deals in the dirtiest streets. The entire city unaware of what is about to happen, except for one person. People start taking pictures saying it's an aurora. Mo thinks this is a sign of the Ice Age. The person who called him this time can only be Xiao Ming. The protagonist remembers her and thinks that he himself was blinded by her appearance to let her do such a thing to him. It's time to end this. He answers the phone and Xiao asks if he is still working overtime, and if he saw the aurora, saying it's so beautiful, and asks if in any case he can lend her some money since her credit cards seem maxed out. Mo says they are finished and to not call him again. Ming is confused, asking what's wrong with him and why so suddenly. The protagonist hangs up and deletes her contact, thinking that since there is a second chance, women like her who hurt him will freeze until the end in the coming Ice Age. In the Brooklyn district, Mo thinks it's a second chance, and this time he must prepare well. In the past life, no, he should say in the previous cycle, within 24 hours before the Ice Age, the temperature will gradually drop to the freezing point. From now on, there are less than 28 hours left before the world freezes. It seems like a lot of time, but as the temperature drops, people will understand the problem. Society, already unstable, will become even more chaotic. So, the time he has left to gather supplies is only 1 hour. In addition to common supplies in the chaotic initial environment, they also need something to protect themselves, like weapons. A patrol car approaches, and the officer tells his partner beside him that he feels this guy is suspicious. Still wandering the streets so late, the officer says to follow him, because he's going to show a few tricks. The officer tells him to stop there and not move. The police order him to raise his hands, suspect of robbery found on 4th Avenue, and ask what he has in his hands. The protagonist thinks this neighborhood has been restless lately. They mistook him for a robber and says it's a cell phone in his hands. He looks at the time, thinking he has no time to waste with these two. With luck, they will release him immediately after inspection. The officer tells him to remember this point and not to approach recklessly, asking if he understood and what he has in his bag, telling him to take it out. Mo takes off the bag and says he is a worker. He opens the bag and the officer panics, saying it's a weapon. Then the officer fires. The bullet comes toward him and the protagonist thinks this is not good. And in a second chance, a chance to continue living, he wonders if it will end there because he wants to live. His eyes widen and an incredibly powerful aura is released around his body. Mo wonders what is happening and if he can clearly see the bullets, and if time is slowing down and thinks he can dodge it, it doesn't seem to be an illusion. The protagonist calls him an idiot and thinks to himself that he is a taxpayer and wonders if he is really going to shoot a taxpayer and thinks he has no time to waste with someone as stupid as him. The bullet falls to the ground. Mo moves quickly and lands a punch to his face. The blonde officer is injured and thrown to the floor. The older officer trembles in fear at the sight of his partner badly hurt and asks what is happening, what he did to him, and what he is. The protagonist stares at him and replies that he doesn't know. The older officer reports over the radio that the suspect has escaped, police weapon lost, repeating that the suspect has escaped, police weapon lost, saying today was truly unbelievable. Mo moves quickly, opening the door and entering his home, deeply shaken by what just happened, wondering if that really was real and how he himself could possibly do such a thing, and thinks he should try again. Mo stands in front of the mirror, aims his gun and fires, and widens his eyes as he sees his reflection block it and thinks he caught it just as he imagined, and wonders if he gained superpowers. He thinks that when he checked before, there was no ice seal yet, and wonders why there is ice on his body, and if it could be something like high-speed movement, like a supersonic jet, since it seems this superpower is related to speed, although it's not a particularly special ability. Since he already foresaw the day of the apocalypse, this ability might allow him to be one step ahead faster. Then he hears a noise and wonders who could be visiting him so late. He opens the door and realizes it is the landlady. She asks if that was the sound of gunshots. Mo replies that it was the TV, the remote is broken, and apologizes. The landlady says that the nearby market was robbed once. Security there isn't very good, but everything is fine. The protagonist thanks her for the advice and says she is very kind. The landlady tells him that young people still need to take care of their health and not work too much overtime. Mo shuts the door and thinks that now, back to the matter, how to solve the supplies, and to wait, since she just mentioned the nearby market, everything should be there. It's time to stock up. Later in the market, the camera moves around the store and the protagonist is looking at what to buy, moving quickly, but the clerk doesn't even notice because she's sleepy, until a machine next to her computer starts spitting out lots of paper. The clerk is confused, asking what's going on, and if someone just bought something, and on the paper it is also written for her to forgive him, not be scared, go home quickly, and stay safe. The clerk finds the message strange, and says first it was a robbery, and now this lunatic. A man approaches with a gun, points it at her head, and the clerk says she has been really unlucky lately. The bandit says it's a robbery and for her to hand over the money and hurry. Someone is watching from afar. The bandit with the gun drawn suddenly feels the glass freeze and asks why it suddenly got so cold. His partner tells him to look at the door, and it's a monster, terribly frightening and huge. The bandit panics, asking what kind of monster that is. They shoot and realize the monster remains unharmed. The creature stretches out its hand, grabs one of them, and decapitates him. Plasma splatters, and the clerk grabs her phone and starts taking pictures of the monster devouring the bandits. The police in their post look at the phone, and the older officer asks if this is one of those live streams that young people like. The guard replies that they've been quite popular recently, but what he's watching is a short video. The older officer asks what is happening and if the program ended. The guard asks if it doesn't look like a government emergency message and says the alarm went off. The older officer says it seems something happened. A voice says, "This is the Department of Security and Logistics for the Homeless." The protagonist thinks it's starting, and the voice continues announcing that the city is experiencing a cold wave for inexplicable reasons, and that citizens should close doors and windows, keep warm, and not go out. The cold wave is coming, the first to suffer. Brooklyn, 1 hour 0 minutes and 9 seconds. At Building 58 in the new district, a common apartment, it is announced for citizens to pay attention. This is the Department of Internal Security and Logistics. The older officer asks why the Department of Internal Security and Logistics would get involved, and says it must be something very serious. The guard says it shouldn't be anything too big. The weather has been very strange lately. It is still announced for citizens not to panic. Mo is preparing and thinks that this time there will be no mishaps. The announcement continues that due to the intense cold wave, they should close doors and windows, remain inside, and keep warm. Elsewhere, the henchmen are beating a boy, and Luo, smoking, asks if he's still not going to talk. The boy replies that he really doesn't know. Da Long asks if he doesn't know. Luo shows a photo of the boy lying with a woman and asks what this is, and if he dared to drug the boss's daughter. The boy answers that he really didn't know at the time. Da Long says to forget it, and that someone like him has to pray hard for at least God to have mercy. The boy's hand is stretched out and Luo cuts it with a knife, then counts how many fingers he sliced off. The subordinate asks what they will do with this guy. Da Long replies that for the sin of lust, the end is by fire. This poor apartment has a boiler, so just throw him into the boiler. The thugs put him inside a sack and throw him in. The hooded one says that boiler looks really old, and asks if he thinks it will explode if they put a body inside. His partner tells him to stop talking nonsense. Luo is still waiting for them. The hooded boy says something's wrong until an explosion happens and he is thrown far away. His partner calls him unlucky. Elsewhere, a drill is being used by the protagonist, and he talks about a structure for plant cultivation, finally completed, and thinks that with the current supplies, even if he doesn't go out, he can endure for quite a while, but it's still not enough. Supplies eventually run out. Sustainable self-sufficiency is the key. His plan is to build a perfect survival room that is self-sufficient. The freezing phenomenon has already been happening for almost an hour. He has to hurry, and wonders if now isn't a good time to speed up, and thinks time is life. Then someone knocks on the door, and Mo wonders who could be knocking at this hour. He opens the door and wonders why the feeling of opening it is so familiar. The old man says, sorry to disturb him. The protagonist wonders about security and what's happening and asks what the problem is. The old man replies that the broadcast just said the outside temperature drops suddenly, but the heating is broken, and they fear people won't notice during the night, so they came to warn everyone, just to be safe. Mo wonders if the heating broke and thinks he remembers something similar happened last week. The heating malfunctioned at that time and wasn't repaired in time, and when they went to fix it, it was already ruined. He cannot repeat the same mistake again. It must be fixed, and asks if he can take a look. Maybe he can fix it. The old man says that would be great. The protagonist closes his door and heads upstairs. The guards ask where he is going, and Mo asks if the boiler room isn't in that direction. The old man replies that the apartment's boiler room is down in the basement, so they need to go that way. The protagonist thinks, wait, he remembers the boiler room in the apartment is illegal. Fang mentioned that, it should be upstairs, and wonders if he's developing Alzheimer's too early. They enter, and the guard says the gate is way too cold. Mo thinks that smoke looks strange. It's like cold air, and the old man asks if he could. Then, still in the same place, the protagonist is fixing things and says it should be fine now, until he notices liquid on his hand and monsters behind the guard, asking if there's any more problem. The creature crushes his head and says they are starting to grow back. Mo wonders how it can be white skin, and the old man asks what the hell is that? The guard is terrified to see the monster coming toward him. The protagonist thinks this is not good. He moves quickly, dodging attacks and protecting the remaining guard, thinking that was close, and Joe almost lost his head. And Mo notices the door is still open, and that's perfect. If he runs at full speed, he can escape. The protagonist runs quickly and wonders why and how it can keep up with his speed, and thinks this is bad, and wonders if maybe it's because he's carrying old Joe and his speed isn't fast enough. And Mo thinks sorry, but he'll have to throw him in order to get out of there. The guard is thrown, saying it's hell, and what kind of situation is this? Joe falls outside, the protagonist looks to the side, and the monster destroys everything around. Mo sighs, observing the beast, and says it seems this is related to the old man and wonders why this happened, since he needs to understand it. And he starts to recap first. When he was holding the old man, White Skin managed to catch up with him. Just now, without old Joe, his speed was greater than White Skin's, and he wonders if there could be some condition limiting his ability. The monster tries to attack, but the protagonist dodges quickly, thinking that what can be confirmed is that this condition has nothing to do with White Skin, so it must be related to the old man. When he threw Joe, a phenomenon happened. A similar energy appeared in him when his ability activated, and he wonders if there is a connection between them. Stones float. Mo thinks he understands. In the previous life, humans faced White Skin without any chance of survival, which is why whenever he saw one, he only thought of running, but now it's different. As long as his assumption is correct, someone who was once prey can also become a hunter. The protagonist picks up a stone, begins releasing power, stares at his enemy, and throws the stone at it, blasting a huge hole through its body, and Mo thinks that, just as he imagined, his assumption was right. His ability can only affect targets contaminated by energy. As long as they are contaminated by energy, he can accelerate them. With acceleration, the kinetic energy of objects will increase. Even a small stone, when accelerated to a certain point, has the power of an electromagnetic cannon. Liquid falls to the ground and begins dripping from the protagonist's body, and he wonders if it's blue plasma. What the hell is happening there? More and more liquid pours from his body until he collapses to the floor, feeling extremely cold. The old man calls him Lin and tells him to wake up and open his eyes. Mo thinks thank God he's okay. Voices urge him to wake up and not fall asleep. The old man asks how things are outside. The woman answers that the wind is too strong. They can't go to the hospital like this. And another person says the main gate is frozen, unable to withstand the blizzard. Joe says to find something to block the wind first, otherwise they'll freeze to death, and to go to the security room and turn on the heating. The woman says he looks poisoned and asks what happened in the basement. Voices keep telling him to hold on and not sleep. The old man says he saved his life, and he needs to thank him properly. Fang tells him to stop talking and go upstairs to find Joe. Someone asks for space, and voices say they're almost there, to hang on. Joe says he'll be fine. The nurse says just leave him there, it's better to check the stairs, everything's in chaos, and he's still alive even with such a low body temperature, asking if he's one of those cryogenic people. Later, still in the same place, the protagonist is lying on a stretcher, and the nurse says, regarding record 409, male patient, 20 to 25 years old with suspected symptoms of poisoning, still in a coma. Vital signs should be considered abnormal. Body temperature is around 10 degrees Celsius, but pulse and nerve reflexes show no abnormalities. It's unbelievable. Plasma separation has been completed, and they're going to look at the results. Interesting, never seen this before. The plasma's appearance before centrifuging looked no different from normal plasma, but after centrifuging, blue impurities were separated from it. Analysis of the plasma sample will take some time, continuing to observe the patient's superficial characteristics. If you don't look closely, you might mistake it for a vein, but if you look carefully, it's like some kind of allergic reaction. Then Mo opens his eyes, and the nurse asks if he's awake, and the protagonist wonders what's happening to him. The nurse says she suggests he not walk around like a headless chicken right now. Lin asks who she is. She lights a cigarette and answers she's just an unlicensed doctor. Due to some reasons, she can't reveal her name. But he can call her Dr. Joe and says now she'll see, asking how he ended up like this. Mo wonders what she means. The doctor says honestly she's never seen symptoms like his before and asks what happened in the basement, saying now she's very interested in him. Brooklyn, temperature minus 29 degrees Celsius. The world record for lowest body temperature is 13.7 degrees Celsius, the lowest ever recorded, although theoretically the human body can tolerate 0 degrees Celsius. But at that temperature, body tissues freeze and cells are destroyed. In fact, temperatures below 32 degrees Celsius can cause atrioventricular tremors in the end. That's called hypothermia. Humans cannot survive in an environment of minus 29 degrees Celsius. It's even more impossible to survive with a body temperature lower than 13.7 degrees Celsius. Joe puts a thermometer in his mouth and says he can let go. And to take a look, this is his current temperature, 11.5 degrees Celsius. The doctor says it's a miracle he's alive, and the protagonist wonders how that's possible and if it's because of his ability. He thinks there's no time to think about that now. He must complete the plan as quickly as possible. Joe says she understands. Then Lynn slips and falls. The doctor says she's sure she told him not to move. His body is very weak now, but that's not the point. She discovered what he has and asks if by chance he has some kind of superpower. Mo wonders how she knows and thinks he has no time to waste with her here, and asks what kind of lame joke that is. Joe replies not to underestimate a doctor's power of observation. She was in the second basement. The protagonist thinks that as long as the ability is active, even if he has to climb all the way up again, it will still be fast. Then liquid drips onto the floor. Lynn vomits blue liquid and wonders what the hell is happening to him, why he can't use acceleration now, and why at this exact moment, and thinks that according to last week's experiences, what's about to happen is, until someone walks in and says that after the meeting with the doctor, the two of them need to behave a little better. They are in front of door 509 and Joe and Mo hear noises. He looks surprised, not understanding. The doctor tells him to get out, stand up, and give her his hand. The protagonist asks what the problem is, what's outside. Joe says to lie down. Lynn wants to know why, all of a sudden, and the doctor says no more questions, just listen. If he wants to survive, he needs to do what she says. Wait there, close his eyes, and don't move no matter what, and asks if he understands. Joe opens the door and Luo enters, apologizing for the disturbance. The doctor asks what he wants. Dalong asks if it's all right, could he come in to chat for a bit? Joe replies to do as he wishes, and asks what it is. Luo answers that he heard resident 409 is receiving treatment here and has something to ask him. Mo recognizes the voice. Joe says unfortunately the person he's looking for lost his life to poisoning. Dalong says that's a shame. And the protagonist wonders wasn't he completely frozen before appearing there last week in the previous cycle, and thinks why right now? If he could use acceleration now, he could eliminate this guy himself. Luo observes and says she has worked hard all this time. He asks if she's sure this person lost his life, and says he thinks he just saw him blink and asks what she thinks about checking again. The doctor asks what he means and says she's telling him he already lost his life. Dalong grabs a pair of scissors and asks what if it's just a false death. He raises the scissors. Joe bites down on the cigarette in her mouth and stops him from doing it, hitting him and asks if he's questioning her skill. The subordinates call her a damned woman and ask how she dares hit their brother, and if she wants to lose her life. Luo tells them to stop and that he can forgive the rudeness. He lights his lighter and lights her cigarette, saying she has saved so many brothers on the street and asks how he can repay her. Dalong says it was his fault and asks her not to be angry. He goes to her ear and says he hopes she also doesn't forget who is taking care of her and that dirty, miserable clinic, and that she should give an answer about that soon to think about it. The doctor says that's a lot of nonsense, and now he can get up since he's gone, and she thinks he has many questions to ask. The protagonist thinks exactly. Luo from last week at least had a reason to eliminate him, and wonders why the hell this guy wants to kill him as soon as he sees him, and why this woman wants to protect him. But before anything else, he asks where his clothes are. Joe asks if he's serious that this is going to be his first question. Brooklyn, minus 40 degrees Celsius. The thugs say that honestly, when they were younger and saw their father tending the furnace, they felt they couldn't be losers like him for the rest of their lives, but now they see their father as a great man. His partner asks if it's just the messed up weather outside and says the temperature will return to normal. No need to lament about his daddy. Dalong asks if he thinks everything will get better in a few days. Government messages used to be broadcast every 20 minutes. Now even the internet stopped. It's like the government has given up. This sudden cold wave must be God's punishment for humanity. Joe asks why God doesn't punish sinners like him. Luo replies that he's just managing this apartment and asks if he doesn't think the order he created is harmonious. The guard says order means forcing everyone to go out and get supplies to hand over to him, or else he cuts off their heating. Dalong asks if that isn't good, saying he gives them heating, and they give him something in return, the order of equivalent exchange. Joe calls him a parasite. Luo says it's a pity, The tenant of 409 seems to have already been eliminated, otherwise there would be another person to reap the benefits of the order he brings. The guard looks shocked and asks if 409 lost his life. In another room, the doctor asks if he's already dressed and tells him to come over when he's done. Mo says he'll have to wait a little and wonders if even getting dressed is that troublesome and asks what's going on. Joe asks if he knows how long he was unconscious. Lin guesses 6 hours and the doctor replies it's been 6 days. The doctor says that a lot has happened in these 6 days. Now Luo controls the entire heating system of the apartment. He wants the residents to trade supplies for its use. Otherwise, he cuts off their heat. Many residents were forced to go outside to gather supplies. Going outside now is almost the same as throwing away your life. Those who went probably thought they were going to die anyway. The protagonist thinks about Luo and that no matter where he is, he's a beast. And he asks if there's any way to recover his body. Joe smiles and answers, of course. But if he wants her to tell him, there's one condition. After all, she runs an underground clinic. She doesn't do charity work. And she asks what he thinks. Will he accept? Mo asks what her condition is, as long as it's something he can do. The doctor says that's very good and she wants him to be her research subject to allow only her to study him. And not to worry, since her research won't put his life at risk. As she said, she's very interested in him. Lin says it's done. Joe explains that there's a special substance in his plasma, but she hasn't completely figured out what it is yet. What's certain is that these substances absorb thermal radiation. They help him convert thermal energy into energy usable by the body. This phenomenon only occurs when there's a lack of heat. However, before absorbing a certain amount, the body remains in this cold state. Simply put, the body suddenly has a medium that can store energy. The current state of weakness is just hunger. The protagonist asks if he just needs to eat and he'll be fine. The doctor replies, yes, but the amount required will be quite large. There isn't nearly enough food. Mo says not to worry, he'll manage. Later, Lin puts on a hood and goes down the stairs, thinking that fortunately he prepared in advance and went to the supermarket to do some shopping. Now, just making it back home safely is a victory. The protagonist stands in front of his door, he presses a button and enters, realizing everything is frozen. Wondering if they cut off the heating in his room since that could freeze someone to death. The entire room has become an igloo, and he finds the high-calorie food, chocolate, and he thinks that bad memories are beginning to resurface. He'll have to change brands next time he buys chocolate. Mo bites into the chocolate and realizes he hasn't had any reaction yet. It seems this amount isn't enough. He needs to increase the dose. He keeps eating more and thinks that this feeling is as if there's something inside his body craving heat, and that's bad. He feels as if he's about to lose control, until voices ask if Dr. 409 is open. The two henchmen say the boss was planning to cut off the kid's fingers to open the door, and today it opens on its own out of nowhere. They notice there are supplies. Lin smiles with his back to them, and the two ask who the hell he is, and if he was the one who opened the door. In another room, the doctor thinks that the final simulation report is finally ready. She's going to see what exactly is inside his body. Active state. She wonders if the reversal process affects neural activity. That's bad. If too much glycogen is replenished, he will. In room 409, the henchmen call him a piece of shit and say that no matter who he is, everything in this room belongs to them. The protagonist still smiling while releasing a powerful amount of mana around his body. 72 hours earlier, Joe was in the basement, asking what the hell happened there, and what could have transformed room 409 into this. And what is this? She collects some samples and says it's interesting. The doctor notices a camera and says it seems she'll need to go to the security room to find the truth, until something begins to be announced. It tells all residents to distribute supplies rationally to avoid waste, because from now on, somewhere else the two henchmen are carrying Joe, and one of them says this old man is really heavy. His partner tells him to stop talking and not forget what the boss said. Keep an eye on the boiler. Luo says that all apartment residents need to pay him a small compensation in exchange for heating. In another place, an old man asks if this is some kind of joke and what old Joe is doing. The guard replies it doesn't look like it's the old man. Dalong says it so that everyone realizes the seriousness of this situation. He shuts down the heating and says he'll turn it off for a while to save some resources. And Luo smiles, very excited. In the present time, the protagonist imagines himself in various places, asking if he hates Dalong. And Mo answers of course he does. He strangles the henchman in front of him. The boy is left with no way out. Lin widens his eyes and remembers Luo saying that human flesh tastes almost the same as beef, but he himself doesn't eat beef. The protagonist throws the henchman far away, so far that he falls from the building. People look on in shock as the body turns to nothing but a skeleton. They say it looks like he fell from the 4th floor. The other henchman left behind wonders what the hell just happened. What the hell is this guy? Is he an alien? Since this isn't Area 51. He keeps questioning everything, asking if this is some kind of red aurora. He thinks there's no way to beat this guy. It's better to do whatever he can. Mo smiles sinisterly as he looks at the boy, imagining that he is Luo. Lin moves quickly, appearing behind him. The henchman thinks he's so fast. He's trying to provoke him. The boy tries attacking him in various ways, but he can't land a hit because Lin is too fast. The protagonist keeps imagining that the boy is Da Long, repeating his absurd words. Mo stands still, waiting for his opponent to get closer. He stares at him, and when the boy gets near, Lin cuts him in half. Then someone arrives at the door. It's Ming. She calls to him. The protagonist looks back and realizes she's holding a gun. Then he's struck. And it's the doctor, not his ex-girlfriend, who tells him to relax since it's only insulin. Mo begins to weaken. Joe says it's to break down the excess heat in his body. Then she looks around, various plants, and asks what's going on here. Hunger is a catalyst for human atrocities, cannibalism among relatives, wars. These are all things that have happened in human history. But as agricultural technology developed, human society also gradually stabilized. Yet hunger never left them. Because in a frozen world, cultivation is almost an impossible task. Hunger, a catalyst for human atrocities. Humanity's dark history is about to repeat itself. However, there is always an exception. Later, still in the room, Lin is asleep, and the doctor says he hadn't been awake for long and now he needs to sleep again. And she apologizes for that and asks what all this is about. She picks a fruit and bites into it. She stops, licking her lips and saying the taste is surprisingly not bad. This amount, she thinks, should be enough for the entire building to eat. Later, elsewhere, two people walk through the snow. The woman is trembling and very cold, her stomach growling. The man asks how she's doing and if she can hold on. The woman replies it shouldn't be a problem. The man says to wait a bit. He remembered he still has a chocolate bar. She says she doesn't need it, and the man says she almost got caught by that bastard and he thought it was in this coat. The woman tells him to stop worrying and asks if he doesn't remember they gave that chocolate to their daughter this morning. The man is surprised and smiles, saying he completely forgot. Indeed, so useless, until half of his head is ripped off. The woman looks in horror and sees it's a monster. The creature devours the man's body. Plasma splatters and a voice says, "Delicious woman." She asks what this is and a boy tells her not to just stand there. The woman looks up and realizes he's on top of the building, calling her to come there and to run if she wants to live. The woman starts running while the monster keeps chasing her. She looks back until she's pushed and falls to the ground. The creature gets closer and closer and the woman is terrified. The boy lights a lighter, sets something on fire, and throws it toward the monster, causing an explosion. Sparks scatter around. The creature says it's hot and it hates that. The woman looks back and thinks that thing doesn't seem to be following them. She finds an elevator. Great, she's safe. Until she notices something and realizes the monster is getting closer. Then she panics and presses the elevator button repeatedly. The monster calls to her and keeps getting closer, and the woman is still trying to open the elevator. The boy tells her to close her eyes. The woman doesn't understand until a light is emitted. The creature talks about the bright light and how it hates it. The boy raises his hand, making a symbol, and smiles as he begins playing a guitar, producing a very loud noise. The monster says it hates rock and that it's trash. The woman's name is Dorothy Perez, and her childhood dream was to become a doctor. After growing up, she finally became one, a nurse, and then she met Matt. The two exchanged glances and so on. Then they married, Maggie was born, and they moved into a new apartment. And then, it's something only he and she know, whether it's the world suddenly freezing over, or bandits invading the apartment, or monsters. After going through so much, what is happening now? This man with just a guitar managed to suppress that monster. The monster says this is the most ridiculous thing of all until the boy stops playing, and the creature says it was an annoying noise and tries to attack him. The boy smiles and makes a move, and several objects begin to fall onto the monster, piercing through it and piling on top. The creature's hand trembles in pain. Dorothy asks if it's over and says it's finally all over. She begins to cry heavily and lowers her head. The boy extends his hand to her and says, "It's all right now." Later, still in the same place, Perez sits around a campfire, looking at the photo of her family. The boy tells her to rest in peace. He sits beside her, lights a cigarette, and says, "Dust to dust, ashes to ashes. Besides mourning the dead, they must also protect the living." Dorothy looks at him confused. The boy says it's fine, not to worry. He'll say something. Perez introduces herself. The boy says he can be called Corbin. Dorothy thanks him, and Corbin says it's nothing. Perez asks if he will also go out to look for supplies. Corbin replies that his situation is a bit complicated and to wait a second, let him show her. He came from Seattle looking for a friend, but as soon as he arrived here, he was trapped by the cold wave. He shows her a picture and says, this is his friend, the one wearing the hat. They played together in a band in high school. Dorothy says, wait, that looks like the guy who lives in 409. Then the building begins to shake and Corbin asks what's happening. Everything around trembles and Corbin asks what those things are. Terrifying creatures approach and there are many of them. Perez says this isn't good. That direction is the apartment. Meanwhile, inside, the protagonist wakes up and finds a woman in front of him, wondering when he fainted again and thinking there's a woman's body in front of him. Mo, confused, wonders what's going on. Jo is distracted until she notices he woke up and says she already put it on him. Lin wonders what she put on him and asks what's happening. The doctor replies it's nothing. She just placed a safety measure on him. The protagonist thinks about safety and wonders if it's like this collar. Necklaces are among the oldest ornaments in the world. Their meaning always changes. In the past, they were a symbol of slavery representing control and ownership. But now, they can also be adult toys. The doctor says not to worry, what's around his neck is definitely not for those purposes. Mo thinks he wouldn't have thought of those things if she hadn't mentioned it and says the condition he agreed to was becoming her research subject. Jo says he is indeed a research subject, and this collar is just a special monitoring tool, and asks if he remembers what she said about the things inside his body, saying she told him they help him absorb heat and store it. From the looks of it, now there's more than just that function. This collar was made specifically to prove her hypothesis. When sugar levels in his plasma get too high, it will activate another state of this thing. The collar will change from blue to red when sugar levels are too high. Lin asks what she's talking about and what this other state means. The doctor asks if he remembers what happened 20 minutes ago. The protagonist wonders about 20 minutes and says he can't remember. Jo says not to worry, it's fine if he doesn't remember. She's here to find out what's happening. After all, this is part of the research. Mo thinks he always feels like this woman has some control over him. Well, he really wants to know what's happening. Once he finds out, he'll definitely have the advantage. The doctor presses a button that shocks him. Lin looks aside and wonders what this is, if it's glucose, and thinks, wait, this concentration is really… Jo comments on such a big reaction and says they'll record the data first. The protagonist wonders what she did to him. The doctor says she almost forgot. Mo's body returns to the red marks and he asks what she's planning. Jo shows him a plant. Lin looks at it and wonders if it's a plant, and his eyes begin to change. Around the room, the wind begins to blow strongly while mana is released. The protagonist says she dared deceive him, and that's interesting. A person identical to Mo is summoned. He walks up to the plant, passing by them, and asks if he can see him. Lin is confused and asks what's happening. His twin says they've met again. The protagonist asks if he is himself and says he thinks he's hallucinating. The twin says she can't hear him now. Mo asks with no reaction, saying she can't hear him, and asks if this is his doing. The twin smiles and replies that in a way, yes, but not completely. Lin asks what he means by not completely, and who he is, and why he looks exactly like him. The twin replies that to be precise, it was the two of them together, after all alone. He wouldn't be able to reach this level. Now, about who he himself is, maybe this will help him remember something. The protagonist looks surprised. The twin reveals his true eyes with some blue lightning around them and asks if now he can remember something. Mo remembers the creature from before and says he is from that moment. The creature replies yes. The mark is on Lin's back, and the creature transforms into its true body and says that the powers and ability to resurrect he has were all thanks to itself. The creature also shifts into other people and says they'll get along well. The Bureau of National Security and Logistics, a branch of the National Security Agency, also known as NSLB, or the National Logistics Agency, is one of the few departments in the country that can operate independently even after the collapse of other government agencies. The National Logistics Agency has its own medical unit, administrative units, and even military units. The National Logistics Agency can be considered the last guarantee of civilization in the world after the government collapses. A voice asks if the network hasn't been restored. The woman with glasses says she's been asked that for the 28th time in the past 2 days. Barbara grumbles, and the woman with glasses says the information department says it's a hardware problem, but they haven't been able to reach the engineering department. She knows how things are outside. Much of the data and information is still being used in the most primitive way. Barbara says it's fine. She understands. This is Barbara Ripley, National Logistics Agency, Biochemistry Department, Level 4 leader. She says that to be honest, they're just passing responsibility to one another and asks if the report is complete. Her partner replies almost. Barbara says that's good enough and to send it to her first. The partner asks what about the rest. Ripley asks if she's stupid and says that bald guy won't seriously read it anyway. A voice says the situation is urgent now. Barbara thinks here we go again. The bald man says now isn't the time to argue about these things. First the climate changes, then the cyber attacks. Current communication methods are completely unusable. This is Frank Kordick, National Logistics Agency, Strategic Decisions Department, Level 2 Minister. He also says the operatives on the front line have been out of contact for 48 hours, not to mention those agents that haven't even been properly activated. They're in trouble and need to act. War never changes. And their soldiers? Until he is cut off by Barbara striking him in the groin, who also says not to worry about political matters at this moment. National Logistics Agency, Biochemical Defense Laboratory, Sample Observation Room. Ripley asks what he thinks now, and if he understands why she's anxious. They watch in shock, and Barbara says this was found near the bunkers. The monster walks, saying they are shells. Green says that according to observations, this creature mutated from humans. Ripley says to take a closer look at the thing around its neck, Frank observes. Barbara says that this person is from the Field Operations Department. Cordic asks what's going on here. Ripley replies that it probably happened before the network crashed. A signal from a missing agent was detected shortly before the network went down, appearing not far from the bunker, but when the security department found him, he showed no signs of life. Based on the data before the network interruption, they can confirm he was the activated agent, codename Silver Hammer. However, 24 hours later, the body mutated, turning into what he sees now. Green says they also got some information from the CIA before the network went down, confirming that this creature was being monitored before the cold wave and other related abnormal events. Barbara says this footage is from the same supermarket. These two are the first monsters, those they're temporarily calling shells, and the first psychic they're temporarily calling number 0. Elsewhere, the protagonist wonders what's going on now and thinks that a second ago this was an insect, but now in front of him it turned into a beautiful girl. The creature is naked and approaches him, saying that humans get shy when they see the opposite sex nude. Mo wonders if it's an illusion and thinks the environment around is as if time itself is frozen. The creature in the form of a woman says he could think of it that way. Lynn asks if she can hear what he's thinking. The creature answers, of course, and that now they are fused. The protagonist says her explanation is quite strange. The creature says he can see her now because that woman injected him with enough sugar to activate consciousness. And he must have realized, now the self he sees is just an illusion in his mind. Mo says that the doctor said the substance inside himself is her, and asks if the other state means he was activated. The creature says that, strictly speaking, that is his plasma, and it's that part that gives him the abilities. Lynn asks why she's parasitizing his body. The creature replies that he really is curious, and that they are different from humans. They are not part of this dimension. The protagonist asks about not being part of this dimension. The creature answers that they must parasitize the bodies of natives from various dimensions to gain the ability to understand this dimension. Mo asks what this is and if it's a piece of cheap romance. The creature explains that their race doesn't have what humans call names because they can define themselves. His understanding of time is less relevant to them because for them, time is not linear, and they have been traveling through various dimensions since birth. This is their ability, but also their restriction. They cannot interfere with the material of any dimension on their own. They cannot parasitize intelligent beings from other dimensions to use the bodies and break the chains of dimensions. And it must be hard for humans to understand. They want to hear names. They want to see castles built with time and ask, if they can't interfere in the world, how can they prove their own existence? Lynn asks if this is existentialist philosophy and says that from what she's saying, she sounds quite lonely. The creature stares at him and asks if he's feeling pity for her and if that is what humans call empathy, and says that choosing humans as shells seems to have been the right choice. His expression is very cute, but she has to give him some bad news. From the moment they fused, he has been a target of the shells. Elsewhere, the monster moves, looking around, and they say the smell here is food and enemy. They walk toward the apartment. Meanwhile, still inside the room, the protagonist asks what she means by shell. The creature replies that he'll find out soon enough, and if he needs anything, he can look for her since he knows what to do. She disappears, and that red aura disappears too. Somewhere else, glass shatters to the floor. A head is decapitated. A woman runs out desperately. Many people are slaughtered. Others run. A boy runs toward the exit and realizes it's locked, asking how the door locked itself at a time like this. The monsters get closer and closer and attack him. The beasts go after the other still living people, who ask what the hell those things are. Joe is tied up and wonders if those things are like that monster, and if they're sucking plasma, and thinks it seems they still haven't noticed him yet and he needs a way to escape. It'll be hard to break this rope without tools, and this pillar doesn't have sharp edges. Looks like he'll have to resort to his old tricks from his younger days. The old man pulls his finger and dislocates it, managing to free his hand from the rope, and thinks it's good he has those old injuries from his youth. They tend to dislocate easily now. While they still haven't noticed him, he has to find another way. But in this situation, he can't go empty-handed. He needs to reach the security room since there are weapons in the vault. Luckily, those dumb thugs didn't realize it's a weapons locker, until he runs into a monster in front of him and says, "This is shit, damn it." In another room, Joe says that just as she thought, these plants respond to his influence, capable of growing quickly in a short time. The protagonist asks if she can undo this crap now. The doctor replies that although she can, he won't be able to use the ability for long periods, otherwise he'll end up in a weakened state. and she's already collected most of the data she needed. Mo tells her to hurry up and help undo it. Then a loud noise is heard and Joe asks what that sound was. They hear someone trying to break the door, and the doctor asks what's happening, and Lin thinks it couldn't be. A monster teleports there, and the protagonist wonders if it's white skin. The creature from before answers that it's a shell. Mo is startled and asks why she's still here. The creature puts her hand over his mouth and says, "Now is not the time to think about that, and if he doesn't act soon, that woman will lose her life." Lin asks why all the women around him are so troublesome. He picks the doctor up in his arms, thinking sorry and excuse me. The protagonist moves quickly and throws the creature far away. He holds on to keep from falling and asks if she's okay, and thinks that even she can make that expression. Joe says it's really fun to experience his ability up close like this. They look at the monster beside them, and the doctor asks what that is. Mo says white skin, shell, he doesn't know, but it's definitely dangerous. He calls her and says to let him handle this thing. Joe says that although he already knows, she still wants to remind him not to overuse his abilities. Lin replies, of course. By the way, he wanted to say that although her approach may be a little clumsy, judging by the results, she really helped him a lot and he thanks her. The doctor gets flustered and asks why he's bringing this up now. The protagonist says that after they deal with these small matters, he'll be sure to thank her properly. The monsters move quickly, surrounding him, and Mo wonders if this is collective action from the white skins, and thinks that handling one is fine, but so many could make him fall into a weakened state again. Joe asks what's wrong, since she was eager to see how he would thank her. Lin replies that she might have to wait a little longer. The beasts get closer and closer, and the protagonist thinks he'll have to face them head on. He gets into position, and the doctor looks at the computer and says that since that's the case, she'll see just how far his limits go. While Mo fights them, he thinks that if he keeps using acceleration continuously, based on past experience, he'll definitely end up weakened again before finishing them all off. But there's a way. He just needs to use it when necessary. The beasts charge together, and Lin wonders if it's a joint attack, thinking these white skins aren't as dumb as they look, but he's no longer their prey, and he'll observe with acceleration. When it's activated, time slows down for him, allowing him to observe the enemy's movements and predict attacks. This way, he can easily dodge strikes even without using acceleration. The same goes for offense. Even unarmed, as long as he accelerates his fist to a certain degree, he can unleash a supersonic blast. After many white skins are defeated, the survivors back away, and the protagonist asks what's wrong, if they're scared now, since this is just the beginning. Joe watches on her tablet and thinks that although calorie consumption hasn't decreased, his efficiency in using abilities has been optimized, and he's used less than 10%, saying it's interesting. She calls to him, saying that with that move, he can break free with it. Mo says just as he thought, she's monitoring his body's condition. He prepares and strikes them all at once, and says she's a fraud. Lin sighs. His body is still fine and at 83%. The doctor says it looks like he's mastered his abilities very well. The protagonist looks at her, and Joe says now she has a new question, and he seems to know a lot about these things, so he should tell her everything he knows. Later, in the basement, Joe is lying down with the beast on top of him. He opens his eyes and is confused, wondering what's going on and about the plasma. The old man realizes he has the tool stuck in the belly of the defeated beast and wonders what just happened, and thinks that without that lever, he would have been finished. If these monsters show up again, maybe he won't be so lucky next time. And Josh notices his phone ringing and wonders if the network wasn't down. He picks up the phone and it's an unknown number. Even so, the old man answers and a voice says good morning, asking if it should call him Curved Blade. Elsewhere, the protagonist says that's all he knows, and thinks of course he won't say he already lost his life once and traveled through time. The doctor says that's fine. She expected as much. And if he's done talking, she calls him over to help with the zipper. She also says it's a dangerous environmental protection suit, a special protective outfit from her old job, still just a prototype, so it has some issues. Mo helps her with the zipper and asks why she suddenly started changing clothes. Joe tells him to take a look at the ceiling. The white skins ended up invading the ducts. In the process, they must have damaged the ventilation system and asks if he hasn't felt the room temperature dropping. She looks to the side and both are surprised to see a child. Lin says he thinks it's his neighbor. The child runs off, and the protagonist says to wait while the doctor says that's why she hates kids. Mo widens his eyes. The child passes through the corridor full of plasma and points his finger, showing the defeated people, and Lin wonders why they have gunshot wounds. The child goes up the stairs, and with eyes full of tears, the protagonist says it's dangerous there, and he realizes it's old Josh who's been taken down and thinks that in his past life, he was the one who took the initiative to share food with others, and he too was killed by the white skins. Mo approaches him, touching him, and says, in the end, good people never manage to have a happy ending. The old man moves. Lin is startled and asks what the hell is going on. Josh says he hasn't lost his life yet, and what's more, he owes him one. The child touches the doctor's hand and asks if she's a doctor, saying that her mother told her doctors wear clothes with a red cross, and there's one right there on her outfit, and asks if that's the case. Can she help Uncle Josh? Joe replies that she'll make an exception today and won't charge anything, and asks what happened to him to end up like this. The old man answers that it's a long story. After he left the boiler room, his plan was to head to the security room, but the first floor was full of monsters, so he ended up climbing the emergency stairs. He found other survivors on the way, and as the monsters kept coming, his only option was to keep going up. That's when Luo approached with his gun and started shooting people, letting the monsters suck their plasma. Josh cursed him and asked what he was doing. Dalong replied that he was obviously using the weak flesh to buy time for himself, and Luo kept shooting people, saying that the strong above the weak. God established those rules when he created the world. Then Dalong went to shoot the child, but Josh stepped in front, taking the bullet, and after that bastard kept climbing, leaving him there wounded until the end. In the present, the doctor analyzes him and says luckily the bullet didn't hit any vital point, only that he lost a lot of plasma, so he needs to get to a safe place. The protagonist says Luo's name and walks off, and the old man asks where he's going. Mo looks back with a murderous intent. Meanwhile, Dalong is shooting at people, and they beg him to wait since they're human. Luo doesn't care, he just keeps shooting and calling them weak flesh. And it's so good. Bodies everywhere. That should be enough to stall those monsters. Though it's an old warehouse, it should be the safest place in this building, and he hopes there are some supplies inside. Mo approaches him and says, "Here they are again." Dalong shoots and asks if he wasn't already dead. Lin moves quickly, dodging the shots, hitting him and ripping his arm off. Next, the protagonist grabs his face and drags him to the balcony. Luo says he didn't do anything. The protagonist asks nothing, and says that for him, none of that happened yet, and after coming back, he didn't take revenge. Instead, he spent all this time trying to build a safe place for himself. Looking back now, that was pretty stupid. Innocent people lost their lives, and that made him furious, of course full of rage, and that rage isn't just his own, he's also angry at himself for being so stupid. Mo attacks him with his ability and throws him down from above, saying that now, if he screws up, he'll do the same to him 100 times worse, because that's the law of this frozen world, and in it, there is no mercy. Elsewhere, Josh and the child are around the fire. The doctor says she thinks the landlady used this place as a storage room. It might turn out useful, there are still things here. Lin is sitting on a box, remembering what he did to Luo and thinking he finally got his revenge, but it doesn't feel like enough. Joe slaps him and asks what he's thinking, saying she already suspected he had some problem with that bastard, and it's normal for people to get compulsive with great power in their hands. However, in his case, it's different, and she thanks him for getting rid of that damned man. The protagonist asks if she also had some problem with him. The doctor remembers before when she was young, and Mo says she doesn't need to answer if she doesn't want to, and that they'll be safe as long as they stay there. But since it was used as a storage room, the heater doesn't work there. Looking at this place, it seems things are still intact, but old Josh is injured and Maggie is just a child. They won't be able to rely on a barrel fire forever. But the white skins are outside and dangerous, so they also need to reinforce the room's security. In terms of materials, they can use what was being kept in this room. However, they still need heat, so they'll have to go to the energy room. Josh says the entire building is full of monsters, and if they don't find a way, the child vomits, and Lin says they'll end up dead if they just sit there. The old man says there's only one way. Later, in the tunnel that's opened, the protagonist falls through and says it had to be the garbage tunnel, until he looks up in surprise and wonders if those are white skins and the eliminated residents, and if they're nesting. What's that noise? Could it be a white skin? Then the doctor jumps down and lands on him. Mo says she's on top of him. Joe tells him if he just moves his hand off her, she'll get up. Then they hear a noise and the doctor puts her hand over his mouth. The monster opens its eyes wide and walks through the place. Joe asks what that is. Lin replies he doesn't know and asks why she came here. The doctor answers that she told him before. It takes 2 people to operate in the energy room and asks if he forgot and says his body is in a weakened state now if he ends up fainting there. The monster walks, and they fall silent immediately. Lin wonders what the hell this is and thinks that this white skin is very different from the others, and he's very weak right now. If he fights it, he'll end up losing. According to the doctor, it seems these white skins don't just eat people but drain them. Moreover, they store the plasma they consume, and those veins look like they're transporting the plasma, and he wonders where it's going. The child looks through the glass and asks what that is. Josh watches. Outside the building, the monster stands still with a huge belly. Corbin says it looks like it's dead. Dorothy answers she doesn't know, but thinks it won't attack them anymore. Corbin asks if that's Morse code. Perez asks what Morse is. He replies it's a language that uses signals. You can speak different letters of the alphabet and numbers depending on the pattern you use. Josh above the glass says he hopes they understand and don't come here. Dorothy asks if he understands what they're trying to say. Corbin thinks he only understands a little and says he thinks they're saying to go there. Perez asks if he's sure they should do this. He replies absolutely, and his daughter must be there too. The old man shouts not to come. Later, elsewhere in the building, the two are still hiding, and the protagonist thinks they need to go down this path, but that white skin is blocking it. No choice, he'll have to fight it. A sound begins to echo and Mo thinks this is great. It seems that sound attracted it. The doctor says if you look closely, those veins on the ground are connected to the dead ones they saw before. And thinking about it, it's kind of bizarre that they're using humans to build a nest. Around the place, it's full of eggs, and a beast stands, emitting sounds. Another beast approaches, puts its hand inside the organs and pulls out a weapon, moving it. Lin stops and feels a sensation. The monster charges at the doctor to cut her, but the protagonist steps in front and takes the hit instead, saying it's much faster than him and this white skin is stronger than the others. The monster moves quickly, looking toward her. Mo is confused, wondering if the target is the doctor. The beast rushes at her and Lin quickly moves in front once again, thinking it's too fast. At this rate, it'll be hard to endure, and if it goes on like this, the two of them will end up dead there, and he wonders if he's going to die again. The creature appears again and smiles, telling him to run, asking, isn't that what they do in situations like this? And says, as he knows, in this frozen world there is no mercy. It's a world where all are equal, and if he abandons this woman, maybe he'll survive. The protagonist replies he won't run and asks if he does that now, what's the difference between him and Luo in the end? And says, it doesn't mean he has to abandon his humanity to survive. The creature is confused, and Mo says if she's part of him, she'll understand this. When innocent people die, his chest aches and he feels suffocated. That pain is his humanity suffering, proof that he's still human, just as fossils of ancestors with fracture marks show that even in the primitive era there were companions who didn't abandon each other. Thousands of years have passed and many humans are still like that. So even now he can only think of one thing. Since he has this power, he'll make sure to use it in his favor. Particles begin to move from his body. The monster keeps swinging its sword and the doctor is shocked to see a light being emitted, hesitating to speak. Lin changes his body, becoming like a white skin. And with this power, he will protect people, and thinks he looks like this white skin. But he isn't the same as it. The protagonist begins to release mana. The creature says it's interesting. It seems she was right to choose him. Now he'll be able to feel the essence of this power. Mo says it's his turn to attack. He approaches the enemy, striking it. The white skin dodges. Lin thinks it got faster, but it's still not enough. Joe asks what's going on and says he created a layer on his skin, as if he absorbed energy from the air and turned it into this power. Judging by where they are, she asks if it's like an unlimited energy reservoir. But what exactly is the essence of this power? While the protagonist fights, he thinks he'll set aside his resemblance to the white skin for now. Even with this power, it's hard to deal with it. The two exchange blows, and Mo thinks that since he can accelerate time, could he do the opposite? The monster dodges his strike and rushes toward the doctor. Lin launches an attack, and when the beast is getting closer and closer to hitting her with the sword, time stops for a moment, preventing it from striking her. The protagonist says he thinks it worked, and now he'll finish it with a single blow. Shadow Fist. The beast explodes. The doctor falls to the ground. Mo reaches out his hand to her and says, they need to go. They can't stay there. Later, still in the building, the temperature is at 26 degrees Celsius, and a voice says, it looks like they did it. The child gets excited, saying it's warm and she wants to see her mother. Then a noise echoes. Josh asks what that was and wonders if it could be a white skin. Someone opens the door and says, they're back. Josh looks scared and says they finally returned. Lin asks what happened. Joe tells him not to get worked up. The wound will open and she'll have to stitch it again. The old man says, just now, exactly now, he heard a noise in the heating ducts. Maybe that was it. The protagonist asks about noises and says it must just be the ducts aging. Not to worry, it's just an illusion. Those guys are all focused on the lower floors now. Noises begin to echo. The ducts break and start falling until someone falls with them. The old man says, see, didn't I tell you? Mo asks if they've turned into plasma nests. The child calls for her mother. Corbin says then it wasn't the heating duct, it was too hot. Dorothy asks what her daughter is doing there. Maggie replies that a strange white dog broke into the house. A strange blonde uncle shot many uncles and aunts. Uncle Josh saved her but was wounded by the blonde uncle, so she called the black neighbor uncle and the red-haired neighbor aunt to save him. The old man says this child's memory is really good. Corbin calls him a stinky brat. Lin watches. Corbin runs toward him, saying he missed him so much. The protagonist looks confused and the blonde says he walked from Aberdeen, crossed the whole continent, and asks if he knew. Mo looks at him and punches him, asking how he dares. Corbin, holding his face, asks how he could do that. Even his father never hit him. And Lin, confused, wonders if he's also from this timeline. Like the doctor, it seems he's known him a long time, but he doesn't have a friend in Aberdeen, and he wonders if when he resurrected, not only the future, but even the past was altered. Corbin grabs his arm and asks, didn't he say they'd start a new band? That he'd be Slash's right hand and himself Hendrix's left hand. The protagonist asks when he said that. He doesn't even know who they are. The child asks her mother if they're friends. Perez answers she thinks so, and Mo wonders who the hell this blonde is, and thinks the differences from the previous timeline could be explained by the butterfly effect. After all, what was changed was the future, but it doesn't explain this blonde tied to his past. The only one he can ask is her. He calls her Miss Parasite and says he has some questions for her and thinks before she always showed up on her own, but now that he's looking for her, she doesn't respond and is selfish. The doctor says now isn't the time to dwell on the past. Lin asks about dwelling on the past since he doesn't even know this guy. Corbin asks if he made him come from so far just to make fun of him. Joe asks what he means, and if they realize what the current situation is, and says that although they solved the heating problem, there's an even more serious one now. Those whites seem to be children of that mother, and these plasma nests are sending plasma to her. As for the plasma nests, based on what they saw downstairs, this building will be completely assimilated sooner or later. So if they keep ignoring it, when the plasma nests reach here, the protagonist says they'll have to face more whites like the one with the gut sword, and if that's the case, how could his power? The doctor interrupts, saying it's not that simple. His indicator light is constantly blue, and after using Heisha, it shines even brighter. Mo wonders if she means that black form, and asks if she means activating Heisha also consumes a lot of heat. Joe replies yes, and that activating that state demands a huge amount of heat. Besides, the heat he has now may not be enough to use it again, and he's the only one there who can face the mutant whites, so the current situation is very bad. Lin thinks if he wants to survive, wants to use this power to keep protecting, he needs heat. Then he says he has an idea and asks if there are some boards left there. The doctor answers yes and asks why. The protagonist takes his physical holy sword, positions it together with a nail, and thinks that no matter if it's the plasma nests outside or the threat of the mutant whites, the core of the problem or the main conflict is just one. As the saying goes, hunger is the best seasoning. Those who don't eat have no strength to work. Eating well gives strength to work. The doctor says she understands another hydroponic system. His reasoning really is unique, and she asks if he truly intends to farm here. Mo answers that this is the value of honest workers. It's also an innate ability. Besides, more and more people are joining them. Solving the food problem is the priority, and he knows well what hungry people are capable of doing. Joe asks what his next step is. Lin says this empty hydroponic system won't produce food out of nowhere. Sure enough, as expected, the bodies on this floor have disappeared, not even traces of plasma, and he thinks it looks like something is collecting the bodies. Must be that big one from earlier. Which means in no time, the plasma nest will reach this floor. He needs to act quickly. He wants to use the black form to wipe out the source completely, but before that, he has to solve the food heat problem. Corbin asks where he's sneaking off to alone. The protagonist asks how he followed him. The blonde says everyone understands and asks if he's ignoring him because he thinks having a lousy friend like him is shameful and tells him not to worry. He understands. Now that he works at a big company, someone like him looking like a bum isn't well regarded. Mo wonders what's with this guy, and Corbin keeps following, saying that now it's just the two of them. He can say anything openly, no need for ceremony. Lin can only think how annoying this guy is. The blonde asks why he doesn't say anything. The protagonist looks and says he's screwed. He comes face to face with a giant monster. Long ago on a rainy day, someone calls for Jerry. It's Corbin, saying the two are quite alike. Both were kicked out and can only hide under this bridge. From now on, they'll depend on each other. If he doesn't want to, he doesn't have to leave. Besides, it's still raining. Someone approaches, saying he knew he'd be here. Whenever he's kicked out of the house, he hides here. By the way, he asks how many times his father has hit him. The blonde asks if he came to provoke him. The boy smiles and answers, how could he? And asks if even to run away, how can he hide under an old bridge like this? Saying it's pathetic. If they're going to run, then they need to do it with style. Corbin asks where he learned those cliche lines. His partner extends a hand and says, let's go. If they're going to run away, it has to be with a good friend, to be stylish. The blonde says only he would say something like that. In the present, Mo pulls the blonde and asks what he's thinking. While Lin drags him, he says, to run. Corbin says this escape isn't stylish at all. The protagonist says it looks like the plasma nests have already spread up to the 4th floor. He needs to get back quickly to grab the seeds. The blonde says he told him even escaping should be done with the style. Mo asks if in a situation like this, he's still talking about that. Corbin asks, wasn't it him who said that? Lin replies he never said that. The blonde asks if he's still insisting and says enough already. The wall behind them starts breaking until a hand bursts through and grabs Lin's head, and he thinks it's already too late. Corbin on the ground watches, and the protagonist thinks his head is about to be crushed. The blonde lights a bottle on fire and tries to draw the monster's attention, calling it, and then throws the burning bottle, shouting to release his brother. Flames flare up, and Mo is thrown far, landing in the nest. Lin thinks this is the plasma nest. He's being absorbed by it until he starts being covered by the whole nest, and the protagonist thinks it's a curse, wondering if it's going to end like this. He looks at his hands and wonders what's happening and where he is, until he thinks, wait. Mo notices a girl tied up and wonders if she's white or human, and if she's still alive. Lin runs and steps in water puddles, appearing in another place, and wonders what's happening, where he is now, until he notices two people in front of him and realizes it's the meddling blonde from Aberdeen, and wonders who he's talking to, until the protagonist notices the other is a child who looks like himself, and he wonders if that's himself, and if they're really friends, and if this is his memory. The boy who looks like him says no, and that he isn't the blonde, he's Kurt Cobain. He's his friend, not his, and calls him Mr. Thief. In the present, Mo is wrapped in the nest. Corbin reaches out his hand and pulls him, saying if he died like this, it'd be pathetic, and asks if he's okay. Lin answers he almost became food for the plasma nest and wonders what that was just now, if it was a dream, and thinks to leave it aside. Now's not the time to dwell on it. The protagonist wonders what they'll do about this big guy since it doesn't seem to fear fire much. The blonde says this guy is really tough and offers him another drink. Mo holds the bottle and says, wait, don't go so fast. The fat of whites burns quickly at high temperatures, but this one seems to absorb flames or heat. Besides, it has a very strong regeneration ability. He fears incendiary bombs won't be enough to kill it. Corbin says he really is analyzing the situation calmly, and that's rare. However, Corbin throws the flaming bottle and says to burn it until it can't regenerate anymore. The protagonist, desperate, asks if he didn't hear. An explosion erupts. Lin begins releasing magic, thinking he'll have to use the black form and can't let this guy stay inside the building. But then Mo notices something strange and realizes nothing changed. The doctor was right. He doesn't have enough energy now to transform into the black form, so he doesn't have the power to fight this guy. Then the protagonist is shocked to realize this creature can absorb heat and thinks from the beginning it felt familiar. The doctor also mentioned that in the blue state, he himself absorbs heat around him, and he gets an idea. Maybe this method could work. The monster smashes everything nearby. The fortress has been under attack again by those monsters. They've been losing men for a month. They moved locations countless times to avoid the white armors, but they always find them no matter how much they try to escape. So they had to keep on like this, fleeing, losing, searching for a new base. It can't go on. Lin goes up to a man and says, enough of this. The man looks confused and Mo says he doesn't want to keep running anymore. In the present, while the protagonist fights the monster, he realizes he was right. Absorbing energy from the environment means the heat of the flames can also be absorbed and converted into energy. Corbin asks why he has horns. Lin's body now has sharp parts forming around it as he charges the monster. The blonde, not understanding anything, just struggling to withstand the pressure, asks what's happening. The monster stands still, collapsed. Mo tells his partner to listen, that whatever he thinks he knows about him before, it has nothing to do with who he is now. He isn't the same person he knew. Corbin is distracted by his armor, finding it amazing, and asks where he got it. The protagonist asks if he understood what he just said. The blonde replies what he said was that he can't say he's a blackie. Lin says that's not what he meant at all, and to forget it, he won't argue with him. That giant doesn't look easy to deal with and asks how many Molotovs he still has left. Corbin checks and says after looking that there are plenty. Mo asks if he just shoved them all in a box and how he managed that. Then the protagonist notices the monster waking up, and the blonde asks what they should do. Should they run? Lin remembers before and wonders about continuing to flee. In the present, Mo thinks no and charges at the monster, saying running away is so boring. Corbin, surprised, watches him and thinks it really looks like he's changed. The protagonist closes in on the monster, dodging its attacks and countering. Lin clenches his fist and strikes it. Then he flips, leaping off the ground, saying it's his partner's turn. So the blonde throws the flaming bottles, causing an explosion. Mo thinks white armor fat is flammable. As long as the wound is deep enough, the fire can burn the fat, but it won't take long for it to regenerate. So while it burns, he'll absorb the heat of the charred white armor fat and use the enemy's flesh and plasma for his own benefit. The protagonist starts channeling his power through the armor, leaping and sprinting toward the monster until he stops, pointing a finger, touching the enemy and unleashing enormous pressure. Corbin, shocked, asks if that's a sound barrier. The monster's body is destroyed, and Lin thinks that if the entire body is destroyed at once, even the strongest regenerative ability is useless. However, thanks to Kurt, he managed it. Though he seems suspicious, he really did help him. Mo grabs his partner's hand and asks if he's okay. The blonde finds it strange and asks why he's being so polite. The The protagonist thinks that although he's sloppy, at least he's not an idiot. The blonde asks what they're going to do downstairs again, and immediately Lin thinks he takes back what he just said. In the corridor, someone shouts loudly. They arrive at door 409, and Corbin, excited, asks if they're here to get seeds and the nutrient solution, and when he learned about agriculture and how he got all these things. And that superpower, when did he get powers? Mo wonders why, God, did he send him an idiot after letting him be reborn? Then the collar on his neck beeps. The protagonist wonders what that sound is, and if it's from his collar. The blonde says he was meaning to ask that. His collar is really cool and asks where he got it. Lin sticks 2 fingers in his nose and tells him to shut up. Anne says the doctor is hurting him, plasma is leaking. She speaks through the radio and asks what they're doing. Mo asks if this collar works for communication and says, forget it, he only managed up to the 4th floor. Jo says she has good news. They found some more old things in the warehouse, like this old radio station, ceram site, and also some gardening supplies, nutrients. The lady of the house probably used them for planting flowers. The protagonist says this really is good news. The doctor says it's a personal request. Later, in another room, Lin thinks he can't believe he's back to this. Corbin says no way, asking if there's a lab in this dump of a building. Mo answers, it's a clinic, but he's right. The blonde asks if that strangely dressed woman is really a doctor. The protagonist wonders if the capsule the doctor wants is this one and what it's for, since it's suspicious. What Kurt said might be true. The doctor may not be a doctor at all. Lin notices and wonders if the label is biohazard and if the doctor is secretly studying the white armor. And who the hell is the doctor? Corbin asks if she really opened it. Mo glares suspiciously and asks what he's doing, telling him not to mess with other people's computers and asking if he'd erase the doctor's important data. The blonde answers he's not an idiot, how could he? Then the protagonist thinks of information and tells him to get out, calling him a lackey. Corbin gets irritated and says not to call him a lackey. Lin starts kicking him and tells him just to leave when told and maybe pick up some useful supplies. The blonde says not to kick his guitar. Mo starts working on the computer and thinks he might find something there, especially about the doctor, until he finds a photo and wonders if it's a hospital and thinks she looks a little different. The doctor looks so young and a little shy in that ID, and he understands she's hiding many things from him. Later, in another room, someone knocks on the door. Josh says he's back and after opening the door asks how it went. Corbin says it went fine and the protagonist tells him to shut up. Meanwhile, Jo is hiding, watching them from the corner, and Lin opens a bag saying they managed to collect some seeds that were in the room because of the limited number of floors they could access, and unfortunately didn't find anything to eat directly. The old man puts a hand on his shoulder and says it's not his fault and Luo has been sending people to search the residents' supplies all the time. Mo says they'll plant them now. Josh says to let him help since he's been planting some things too. The protagonist says no need, he's still injured and he should rest well. The doctor says let her help. She knows a bit of botany and biochemistry. At least she can be useful and asks if he doesn't think so. Lin answers yes. Corbin says he'll help too, but immediately changes his mind and says not to look at him like that. He's actually going to do something else. Mo says he's not helping and to go to the kids' table. Maggie gets excited hearing this. Later, in another room, the protagonist asks about what she requested earlier, if it refers to this. When Jo goes to grab it, Lin pushes her hand away from the capsule and asks if she won't explain anything before taking it. Who the hell is she? The doctor asks if he doesn't already know. Lin says wait, also mentions her expression, and asks if she did this on purpose. So this capsule was just bait to lure him to the house. And what is she plotting? Calling her a former agent of the Biochemical Security Department of the old National Security Agency. Jo says he only got half right, and this isn't bait, it's the key to survival, and asks if he remembers when he transformed into White Fury before, saying it was a lot like those monsters, and she thinks there's a connection between him and those monsters, and this white armor energy storage organ reinforces that theory. Even in that state, it's still absorbing heat, similar to what happened to him. Mo asks what that has to do with the key to survival and why she revealed her identity. The doctor says not to worry. Whether it's food to survive or having enough energy reserves to deal with the mother outside, they need to solve the planning problem in a short period of time. If she's not mistaken, when he made that hydroponic tank, he was thinking of using the red limit state to accelerate plant growth. And in other words, the key to everything now is whether he can enter the red limit state, but he doesn't even have energy to fight, let alone to enter the red limit. Even if he can absorb heat around him, he still can't enter the red limit. That's because the energy storage organs aren't efficient enough yet to let him enter the red limit at will. So if he could add this organ, wouldn't it make absorption more efficient and allow him to enter the red limit more easily? The protagonist says to wait, it's a bit complicated and he needs to sort this out. Jo slams the capsule into him and says that, to survive, he needs to have it implanted. Lin asks if there won't be any rejection reaction until particles begin to seep out of his body into the capsule pressed against him. The doctor is surprised. The particles from Mo's body grow larger and he wonders what this is, why it's happening, and if Black Fury wants that piece of white armor flesh. The capsule is inserted and the glass drops to the floor. Joe says it looks like his body can't wait. A red light begins to radiate through his body along with the particles. Joe, shocked, asks if this is a parasite and if this is the source of his power, and how he can fit such a large mass inside his body. The protagonist smiles, thinking it's about time to plant, and says the seedlings matured naturally and the shelves were sterilized. No green algae, all that's missing is… until he notices something. It's the child asking what that is and saying it's so small. Lin says it's a lettuce seedling. Maggie doesn't understand much and asks about seedling. Mo explains to her that a lettuce seedling is like a baby lettuce, just like her. Maggie says she's not like that, she's taller. The protagonist laughs and agrees. The child asks what lettuce is again. Her mother approaches her and answers that it's the green vegetable in her favorite hamburger. Maggie, excited, asks if she can take her to eat a hamburger when her dad comes back. Dorothy lowers her head and hesitates to mention her father, and Corbin whispers to Lin that her father is gone. Mo notices the heavy atmosphere and tries to change the subject, asking if his partner brought the wheat seeds. The blonde says yes, and the protagonist adds that besides that, they still have some tomato and cucumber seeds and meat and hamburgers, and asks if she wants to eat a hamburger. Maggie, without a second thought, answers yes. Lin says they'll eat once the little lettuce becomes a big lettuce. The child asks how long it will take them to grow. Mo replies that if her big brother were in ancient Greece, he'd be the god of agriculture, and with him, they'll grow quickly. Maggie, thrilled, says that's great. Perez thanks him. The protagonist answers it was nothing and introduces himself. Dorothy says they're all stuck in this situation. If only they could make them grow faster. At least they wouldn't starve. Corbin asks if he thought he was joking and says the Blackie really is super. Lin immediately covers his mouth and says to wait and not tell anyone about his powers. The fewer people who know, the better. The blonde asks why. Mo replies not to ask and remembers the doctor saying she once worked on a field-focused project when she was still in the Secret Service. The security level of that program was very high and the departments involved were confidential even between themselves, but she managed to get some specific information. The project aimed to infiltrate a large number of field agents among civilians to collect information at any time. This wasn't normal infiltration, but immersive infiltration. Through drugs, brainwashing, and hypnosis, agents were made to believe they were civilians, minimizing the risk of exposure. These agents would unconsciously report information, known as human monitors. Those NSB people would do anything to protect the country's bottom line. They don't know if NSB is paralyzed or not. They don't know if there are NSB monitors among them. If they find out about him, nothing good will happen. Anyway, the fewer people who know about him, the better. In the present, the protagonist says that in any case, he has a solution and not to worry. Corbin tries to play it off, telling her not to worry, since he's a Greek god of agriculture. Lin looks around and realizes he's alone and goes to try. He extends his hand over the seedlings, closes his eyes, beginning to release an aura. Meanwhile, there's a hidden camera filming him and transmitting. Somewhere else on a satellite, a voice asks if the device communication has been restored and says it's rebooting the system. Connecting to the satellite, they'll see what they managed to find in the sky and asks again what's happening, saying they'll have to gather ground intel, find some terrestrial equipment. And there are 3 drones available, and since it's so cold, the batteries won't last long, so they'll gather as much information as possible before losing them. They're searching for anything useful until they notice something ahead. The chief orders them to stay low. Hopefully, they've found some sign of survivors or a rescue team. There's nothing interesting on their side until they notice something and get scared, until a drone is struck. The other drones watch and ask what that is, and not to just stand there and to record it. They see a giant monster creating massive pressure. The protagonist, near his seedlings, notices the ground shaking and wonders if it's an earthquake, asking the doctor what's happening. She tells him to look outside and it seems they're running out of time. Lin looks out. Seeing the giant monster, he says that's what the mother gave birth to. The monster asks where it is and repeats the same question again. Then the giant extends its hand. Meanwhile, inside the building, Corbin approaches and asks what's happening. An attack is about to be launched, and Mo tells them to get back and duck. The monster attacks, destroying everything. The protagonist has his eyes closed until he opens them and sees the stone fragments frozen in midair, thinking that was close, and asks if she's okay. Joe replies yes, but his heart is racing. Lin starts coughing and says it's good she's okay, but now isn't the time to relax, and wonders why those fragments are suspended in the air, if it's electricity or magnetism, until Mo looks to the side and realizes it's the monster controlling them. Then the giant launches the stones, causing a huge explosion and impact, The blonde asks what's happening until he sees and rushes to find his friend immediately. Corbin looks down, everything destroyed, and is horrified, and a voice tells him not to be scared. It's the doctor asking for a hand. The blonde asks where the blackie is. Joe asks if he means the test subject. The monster closes in on them. They're terrified, Perez says to run, and Corbin asks what the hell that is, until a red light approaches, striking the monster. The doctor recognizes this light. The monster is thrown far, smashing the building it crashes into. The protagonist, clad in his armor, glares at it. Meanwhile, there's a camera on the ground and a voice asks if that's the monster the rescue team mentioned. Stones are hurled at the camera and the feed cuts. This was the last drone. Inside the satellite, they ask what they'll do now. The man says it hasn't been long since communications were restored. It'll still take some time for the bunker to re-establish contact. A woman says the bunker only needs to wait in the field, since there's a lot to consider. And the soldier asks why not prepare for an exploration. Maybe they'll find survivors. And with the situation outside still uncertain, it's better to wait and see what happens. Elsewhere, another explosion hits, smoke clears, and Lin thinks this is beyond the red limit. It even looks like reignited embers. The monster approaches him, Mo notices, takes a stance, radiating his light. Stones float. The protagonist makes rapid movements. The monster watches. And Lin thinks embers don't burn intensely, they burn quietly, like eternal sparks. The enemy begins gathering stones, forming a stone circle and hurling them all together. Mo thinks the sparks aren't fading, or rather, it's like the prelude to a fire spreading across a plain. The protagonist also unleashes his power, causing a massive impact and destruction around, unleashing powerful red light attacks at the monster. Maggie asks what that red light is. Josh, astonished, asks if that's an angel and says he defeated that monster, like an angel sent by God. But that awful face of his looks more like a demon. Lin watches and wonders if this time he overdid it. A voice asks if it's not fine, saying he's the only one who can handle this kind of power. Mo asks if he's finally willing to come out, and he realizes it's the insect. The insect tells him to look at his face and asks if there's something he wants to ask. The protagonist answers there are many. The insect says that thanks to that crazy woman who fed him the core, he's in a good mood now, so if he wants to ask, he better do it quickly. Lin tells her to explain what white armor is. The insect puts a finger on his mouth and says to take it slow. White armor, empty shell to be more precise, as the name suggests, an empty husk, a body without a soul, unconsciously bound by past life obsessions, just like him, or rather, his terminated self. It asks if he remembers what it said, and says time isn't continuous for itself, so when he dies, he can leave that timeline and go to another one. And in that process, the soul or consciousness goes with it and leaves him, and his terminated self becomes an empty shell. Maybe his empty shell is wandering around out there. Mo thinks of the doctor, of Corbin, and of those places that clash with his memory. It all makes sense. The insect says he understood quickly, and the protagonist thinks technically he's been time traveling, not reincarnating. So, every white armor, he wonders if they all correspond to supernatural time travelers. Elsewhere, the staffer asks what they're looking for while Barbara checks the shelves, asking if that field operative who turned into a monster didn't bring a delivery and saying they need to see what it is. The staffer says this is the highest level of evidence and asks if Caldic won't be angry. Ripley replies he can do whatever he wants. When she opens it, she asks if that's a head. In another place, the monster wonders about its head and where it is. The giant rises again, creating pressure in the area, and Lin, not understanding, asks what's going on and if she can't die. The insect says she's a special child and asks why they don't ask her. Mo, irritated, asks why she's still talking so much and says that if it weren't for her kind, this wouldn't be happening. The insect asks about kind and says all of them are herself. Time isn't linear, and if he read more books, he wouldn't make this mistake. The protagonist, angry, asks if this is the time for correcting errors and why she's acting like a child over it. The monster closes in to attack him. Lin looks aside, dodging, realizing he was nearly caught. This guy is really fast, but nowhere near his own speed. The monster makes stones float and hurls them at him. Then Mo begins to float too and wonders if this is gravity. The monster chokes him and the protagonist wonders if it's absorbing his heat. Lin grows distressed and wonders if they're of the same origin. The insect says it's hard for her to let him be sucked dry, so here she comes again. Two arms sprout from Mo's back, shoving the monster away. The insect emerges from his back clad in armor and particles, saying it looks like she'll have to take action herself, seeing the state he's in. The protagonist is stunned to see her. The insect asks if he thought she would just sit inside him watching, and says not to be surprised. Now with the second core, she can create another body. The monster charges to attack, and the insect says this would destabilize the energy balance. She blocks the strike and says there's no time to lose. The monster readies another attack, and Lin says it's that gravity trick again. The insect tells him not to worry. Since they can't escape gravity, they'll ignite it. Mo notices a light gathering near his body, creating heavy pressure all around. The insect takes an attack stance. The monster lunges. The insect draws her sword glowing with light and slashes. The monster is blasted away and its armor shatters, revealing a symbol. A woman watches from afar through binoculars, saying she's found number 13. Someone asks if she's there. The woman replies not far, but the current situation isn't right for retrieval because she's found an interesting guy. The insect says this is the true power of Black Fury, that it's a waste to fight barehanded. The protagonist watches, wondering if there's another function still. He looks aside and realizes this guy can do it too. The monster conjures a weapon as well. Somewhere else, a man removes his hat, saying it's interesting. He didn't expect they'd take number 13, the sacred child, this far. He originally wanted to use the chaos of the apocalypse to place 13 into an ordinary shell and then use the head's location to find the NSLB bunker, but didn't expect this surprise. The girl asks if they should intervene, not wanting to wait. The boy says if they step in now, they'd expose themselves, and as a member of the Prophets, she must learn patience. The NSLB intelligence network won't stop functioning just because of the apocalypse. The girl agrees, calls him Reverend Cross, and asks why they're chosen by the Holy Spirit. A woman comes up to her and says she doesn't need to be so serious. She hugs her and says she may be a prophet, but she's still a child, asking if it takes patience to care for a child. The girl, annoyed, says she's touching her. Cross says she's late. Jinyu says she took a while dealing with sycophants. He says he's glad she's okay. Cross sets his hat back on and says, now that everyone's here, they'll enjoy the show and the plot to come. Meanwhile, still in battle, the protagonist wonders about gravitational waves. The insect says to go for it. Lin thinks the parasite just used attraction to land a heavy punch, and wonders if she wants to try again, but says to wait. Something's off. The insect watches until she realizes it's repulsion. The monster charges with its weapon to strike the parasite, causing a massive impact, but its blow is blocked. The monster looks, and it's Mo who blocked, saying that, as he said before, sure he's fast, but compared to himself, he's at least 500 times slower. The insect says that Child's ability isn't something a normal empty shell could use. The protagonist says he's noticed too, that compared to a white, she's more like. Cross asks if it's a supposedly empty body that still has a disharmonious soul, saying that when they first met 13, their description was that she's both a sacred child and an empty shell. Her soul and flesh are separated. The doctor watches from afar, thinking she's more like a superhuman than a white, or maybe a mix of both. She doesn't know if it's just her, but in this situation, she wants her test subject not to disappoint and tells herself not to worry. Just remember that when she released attraction before, the body parts she used turned white, and both times, the bronze part was used to unleash repulsion. Lin thinks he gets it and asks if she said to incinerate her, and tells her to increase the heat power. The parasite asks about increasing heat. She smiles, saying she understands now and for him to give her his hand. Mo is surprised. The insect guides his hand, placing it between her breasts. The protagonist, trembling and embarrassed, asks what she's doing. Powerful lights surge. The monster advances. Meanwhile, Lin is still absorbing heat. The enemy closes in. Mo drives his sword into the parasite. The monster watches until it's blasted away by a massive explosion. The foe crashes to the ground. The protagonist grows stronger and advances. The parasite closes in on the monster, and Lin thinks this guy's left hand can release repulsion. So when the enemy is attacked from the left, he'll always use repulsion defensively to control the attack pattern. And in that instant, he should strike to neutralize the right side attack, leaving the monster able only to use attraction. Attraction can't be used defensively, so she can only divert his strike. If so, that's exactly what he wants. This proves her body is like a magnet. If it's a magnet, then there are magnetic fluxes, and those fluxes will become his acceleration zones, stacked with the kinetic energy of his extreme speed. And now, this is the moment to give it everything. Mo strikes, causing a massive shockwave. He looks toward the enemy and drives his sword into him, piercing through. Then the parasite closes in with her sword, and elsewhere Cross snaps his fingers, praying that the Lord protect the chosen sacred child. Golden pilgrimage. Irin is summoned with them. A voice asks if the delivery went well and if she feels dizzy or any discomfort. Irin says she's fine and to shut up. She activates her holy coffin skill, preventing the sword from hitting her. The parasite is surprised, says it's interesting, and asks if this is what it's like looking into a mirror. The sword is a finger from her eye. Irin draws her blade and counters. The protagonist watches, wondering if she's a superhuman. Irin slashes with her sword, extracting something from the monster. The insect appears behind her, but Irin swings her sword, blocking the strike and sending the parasite flying. Lin catches her. Irin, holding the monster's core, says 13 is safe and to retrieve them quickly. Cross says to wait a moment, and he can see her from here, to aim properly, to remember to jump this time when she's ready, since he doesn't want to bring the ground under her feet back. Mo wonders what she's trying to do. Erin says it's a nuisance. The protagonist wonders if she's trying to save that white, but why a human? Erin leaps. Cross waves his hand and tells his partner to hold her properly. Erin is summoned back into Jinyu's arms, who welcomes her back, saying she did well, and little 13 will be fine. Erin asks if Cross did that on purpose. He replies she wouldn't want her butt hitting the ground when returned, since his ability has limits. Erin tells him to shut up. Cross thinks they've retrieved 13, but they'll need more time to incubate a new body, and he really didn't expect him to lose. Jinyu says she can't just toss little 13 like that and shouldn't become a bad child, while Erin struggles to get out of her arms. Cross thinks for 13 to rest easy and sleep for now. The Prophetic Association president said before they need to act cautiously. If not for his inability to challenge the president, he'd really like a good exchange with those two guys. Elsewhere, the two realize they've escaped. Smoke clears, and inside the building, Josh is distressed, saying there's too much smoke and asks what the situation is. The doctor says it looks like it's over. Corbin asks where that monster went and if they're safe now. Joe answers they should be safe for the moment. Maggie asks her mom where that dark brother is. The old man is worried about him too, and asks if he fell from there. The protagonist walks up and asks why everyone's looking down and says that today he realized he really needs an elevator to the 6th floor. Later, elsewhere, Josh asks if after the fall he only hit his head, saying it's truly a blessing from God. The doctor says to move his hand so she can take a look. Lynn says he's fine and in a low voice asks if this is necessary, saying she knows he's fine. Joe replies he loses nothing by letting her check, and also in a low voice says even if they're pretending, they need to make it look real, and asks if he forgot what she said earlier. The old man says everyone's okay and they can consider that a silver lining, but it was probably the shockwaves that broke the pipes outside. The heating no longer works on this floor. After one round, they're back to square one. Mo tells him not to be so discouraged. Actually, the situation isn't as bad as he thinks. When he was climbing back up, he noticed the plasma nest from before had disappeared, which means they can go down now to check the lower floors. Speaking of which, they may be the only ones alive in this building. But now isn't the time to mourn. They can find supplies left behind by residents who died. Even the less useful supplies can serve to build a wind and rain barrier, so don't worry so much. He'll tell everyone to get ready to move, until Josh gets a call and thinks they sure know how to pick their timing. Somewhere else, someone knocks on a truck. They open the door. The boy names the three inside, Captain White, Sergeant Rhodes, and Corporal Lee, and introduces himself as Zion, a secret agent from the Field Operations Department of the National Logistics Department. Under orders from the bunker, he'll need their help to capture Zero, the superhuman Lin. Elsewhere, Corbin asks if what he's saying is that those filthy things downstairs are gone. Dorothy asks if that doesn't mean they're safe now. The doctor says she wouldn't say completely safe. After all, things outside are still ugly, and on top of that, the heater's broken. The protagonist says they need to seize the opportunity. Relocating the base is the best decision. In any case, they might be the only ones alive in this building. They can use any of the rooms on the lower floors, and the central heating system is still working. Joe says that's not enough. Their problem isn't just the cold. They'll also need defensive structures. Lynn says she's right and it'd be better if they also had, and asks the old man whether there should be some self-defense weapons in the security room. Josh answers he thinks so, and not just self-defense weapons. Because public safety in Brooklyn was awful even before the disaster, they'd upgraded the gear. Besides, there are also some barricades and wire mesh. If they use everything, they might be able to cover the whole building, though he doesn't know if that'll help against those monsters. Corbin says he has an idea about that. He discovered by accident that while he was playing a certain melody, those monsters couldn't move. Maybe that's the power of music. Mo says that sounds ridiculous. The old man agrees, and the blonde wants to know why they won't believe him. The protagonist tells everyone to get ready. He and his partner will go down first to scout the situation. Corbin says to wait and hear his explanation, asking why the two of them have to be the ones to go first. Lynn tells him to stop stalling. The blonde asks for a second. Mo says they're just going down to inspect. Corbin says he still needs to put his baby back in the guitar case. Later, in another room, a voice says they didn't notice this the last time they came here, but he's living way too well. The blonde asks if it wasn't like this back in that little town in Seattle and if he's doing something shady. The protagonist asks if it's really that exaggerated and says it's just a normal condo, thinking that given their situation, even normal feels like too much luxury. A sudden freeze in those white skins. Everything happened far too suddenly. Routines and normal life are now a luxury, something beyond reach. This rare peace they have now, he wonders how long it will last. After everything they've been through, everyone is exhausted. They need time to rest and to sort out their feelings. However painful or desperate it is, there's still a reason not to give up. Even if body and mind are covered in wounds, they need to survive without hesitation. As for himself, there are some things he needs to explain clearly. Lin calls his partner and says what he's about to say might sound a bit unbelievable. Corbin asks why he's bringing this up out of nowhere. Mo replies that whether he accepts it or not, what he's going to say is the truth. The blonde says wait and asks if his brain's been damaged from fighting those monsters too much. The protagonist asks why Lin didn't recognize him, how this good friend he hadn't seen in years turned into a superhuman, and that he must have these doubts. Corbin answers that indeed he does. Mo says the person in front of him is someone who should be dead, and the Lin who appeared from another timeline is a ghost occupying his good friend's body, and the true owner of this body isn't here. The blonde looks stunned. Lin says he knows it's hard to accept. The fact that he doesn't believe him is part of what he expected. He's telling him because as the good friend of this body's owner, he has the right to know the truth, and also because the days ahead will only get harder, and he doesn't want trouble because he hid the truth from him. Corbin says so basically he's just a Lin who didn't even have a bad childhood friend, is that it? Mo looks surprised. The blonde says, then they'll get to know each other again. He reintroduces himself and says he's Lin's good friend. The protagonist smiles. Corbin says he gets it and asks what the problem is, since at the end of the day he's still Lin. If he were the one who died and crossed into this world taking over someone else's body, he'd probably be the same as him now, wearing that serious face and saying those lines he thinks are cool. The two shake hands and Mo tells him not to smoke in his room. Later, outside, a truck moves through the snow. The sergeant says they're just a rescue team and asks why the bigwigs want them meddling in those field operatives' affairs. The captain looks over and says he knows time is short, but if they want the rescue team's help, shouldn't they at least exchange some basic necessary information? Zion answers there's no need to beat around the bush. He knows what he wants to ask. As a rescue team, they must have felt the large-scale information blackout recently, and in fact, it was caused by humans. The target they're trying to capture is also being targeted by those people, and it would take a long time to explain everything. And time is what they don't have, so he'll get straight to the point. Since the world froze, the National Logistics Department began organizing the so-called National Security Management Conference. But around that time, the signal was cut and there were complications with the conference procedures. The captain says so that's why the unit was on standby and couldn't receive new orders, but as he said before, maybe it wasn't just a technical failure. It could have been those monsters. The secret agent says it wasn't that either. No matter how incredibly strong those monsters are, they don't have the knowledge to interfere with communications. It can only be the work of humans. The man says, thinking about it, the world freezing, the monsters, the communications being cut, it's too much to be a coincidence. Zion says now that they've restored the signal, the NSLB's top priority is to investigate all of this. Based on what they know so far, the intelligence and biochemistry departments are considering that this entire sequence of events may have been planned and executed by a secret organization, one for which neither the intelligence department nor the logistics department has any record. The sergeant says that can't be. One thing is the CIA not knowing anything. Those idiots always have their heads in the clouds, but not even the National Logistics and Security Department. And she says living or dead, everyone leaves some trace. This is just a story to scare children. She's worked with intelligence departments before and asks how a ghost organization like that could exist. The secret agent says superhumans. Those are probably the ghosts he was talking about. Rhodes says he thought superhumans was just a code name for this operation, and asks if it's true, how is he still sane? Zion replies it's hard to believe without seeing it with your own eyes, but since the disaster, the unit has had contact with them, and as for the results, they speak for themselves. The captain offers his condolences. The secret agent says that superhuman organization operates extremely covertly. Ghost really is an apt name. All they know is that they're the enemy. The man asks if the higher-ups know why there's another superhuman among their targets. The corporal, driving, says they're talking about an organization of superhumans. Maybe they want to absorb others into the group and apologizes since he's only speculating. Zion says he doesn't have access to classified details like that. Maybe it's as he said. Since this is the first one they've truly observed, contacting Code Zero is the only chance to better understand these superhumans, and that's likely why the NSLB decided to focus on him. Then the truck stops. The captain asks what happened and if there's something ahead. Lee answers that they found survivors. The officer says that's strange and goes to take a look. He gets out of the truck and asks if they're okay, says they're from the National Logistics Department, and asks if there's anything they can do to help. They ask if they came to save them and tell them to get them out, that Brooklyn has turned into real hell. The captain says that's going to be a bit complicated, thinks they're a rescue team but on an emergency mission at the moment, but they can't just leave those two people there. They'll have to make an exception, and says they have some resources in the truck, they can spare a little for them. They ask about resources. The officer says he knows it's been difficult out there, but they should try to calm down. The survivors advance to attack. Two hold the officer and another lunges with a blade, but Someone shoots him, stopping it, and it's Zion with his gun, who also shoots him in the head. A guy above is watching them from up high with a fire bottle in hand. The secret agent looks to the side, noticing someone there. Zion aims his gun at the bottle and shoots, making the flames fall on him instead. Meanwhile, the captain hits the thug holding him in the crotch, then elbows him, and the agent shoots him. The officer approaches the female bandit nearby and also shoots her. Then, another bandit comes from behind with an axe. Zion notices him approaching, pulls out his pistol, and shoots, hitting several bullets into him and dropping him to the ground, and says it's clear on that side, and the captain says it's clear on that side too. They get back into the truck. The officer says he's fine and asks if those people weren't survivors. The secret agent says that in desperate times like these, it's expected some resort to desperate measures. Just hopes Code Zero hasn't gone mad too. Somewhere else, Corbin says he'll leave that there then. The protagonist asks what about this. The blonde asks if they're listening. Josh says they can use that there as a kind of greenhouse to grow plants. Corbin says he prepared well, thought he'd have to rely on another zero-cost acquisition. Lynn thinks that to wrap this up, they can remodel the east side of the third floor into a greenhouse for plant cultivation, while the west side is better suited for housing. The sixth floor was seriously damaged, however, and that affected the fourth and fifth floors. Better to gather on the third floor. The first and second floors will serve as choke points for traps. Meanwhile, the CCTV room will function as the headquarters or command center, so to speak. He feels something is missing. The old man says he could shoot with that thing one-handed when he was young. Corbin says for him to stop bragging. Josh asks if he doesn't believe and if he wants him to show in the garage. The blonde asks why not. Mo finds it childish, until the doctor calls him through the collar. The protagonist asks what is it? Joe answers he'll know when he gets there. Later, Lynn goes where she is and asks what the problem is. The doctor answers that in that last fight, asks if he said he saw others like him. Mo answers yes, and she stole the core of that white armor. Joe says, then he better hear this. And she turns up the radio. And a voice says that to his fortunate brothers who survived, to those about to receive this transmission, they must be in the midst of this frozen wasteland. But no, it is not their fault. The protagonist asks what transmission is this? It keeps cutting all the time. And why is she making him listen to it? The doctor answers he'll understand after hearing it all. In the distant past, the Lord brought the flood to wash the sins of this world. And now, he brought the blizzard to punish those who failed to distinguish good from evil. Men were indoctrinated to serve the governing bodies of evil. They monitor every action through money, through desire, through circumstances beyond control. They control them and make them commit evil in their name. But the Lord is merciful. Pure souls will be blessed. They are the sacred children. They are the prophets. They are the reincarnated Holy Spirits. Jinyu strikes, destroying the enemy with a single blow. Lost lambs, they are the prophetic association. They are the sacred who will bring hope in these final times. Inside the truck, the sergeant says casting judgment on the bodies of the evil rulers. The corporal asks what the hell are they talking about now? They will bring salvation to dishonest souls. And on the radio it continues saying to join them, the prophetic association will protect them. And if they can join them, the Holy Spirit will wash away sins. And they can unite, the Father in heaven will guide them to the kingdom. The doctor says now that he heard it all, asks what he thinks. The protagonist asks what he thinks himself, if it doesn't just sound like an anti-government cult, and says that the way they spoke about chosen and sacred child, it sounds like they're talking about superhumans, maybe. Joe completes saying there's that possibility. If that's the case, things are getting serious. For a long time, there's been an urban myth about how the government is controlled by an organization in the shadows. Some say it's the Masons. Others call it the Illuminati. These urban myths have many forms and names, but are usually considered baseless conspiracy theories. However, these stories wouldn't arise from nothing. There is indeed a hidden organization that managed to almost dominate the entire country. They are the Prophetic Association. The Prophetic Association began as an obscure, low-profile cult, but received support from the CIA with the intent of using them as a weapon in international conflicts. Many so-called foreign incidents were their doing, but the CIA never expected the dog they kept on a leash to bite back. They managed to infiltrate the government, and even the Pentagon was taken by their members. To deal with this wild dog, the government created the secret NSLB department. Joe says that's a part of history few know and will probably be forgotten with time too. All things considered, the Prophetic Association was reborn in this frozen wasteland. The protagonist says to pause a bit and asks if that wasn't classified information, and how someone from the biochemistry department would know that. The doctor says, unfortunately for herself, she has a friend, like he has his, but this friend of hers works for Central Intelligence, actually, is a former agent. Elsewhere, inside the truck, the corporal asks if everything is okay. In the building, Joe continues saying that according to Central Intelligence, the Prophetic Association wasn't just dismantled, but annihilated completely, meaning none should have been left. After all, the NSLB is not like those CIA idiots. With everything they've discovered so far, she came to a conclusion. The prophetic association of superhumans came from a parallel universe. They are ghosts just like him. Lin says wait and asks if it's because of the collar, and if she was spying on him, then she heard it all. The doctor says it was a very emotional moment, a bit sappy for two men. Mo says that's how men form bonds, like she knows anything about bonds between men. Joe says that if that's the case, maybe the prophetic association already has its eyes on him. In other words, there's one more target to worry about, and asks if he wasn't going to renovate the new quarters and tells him to help carry her things to the new room and not forget the ashtray. The protagonist sighs and says, after all this, bets that was the real reason she called him there. Inside the truck, a voice fiddles with the radio and talks about the prophetic association, and that explains why there's nothing about them in the records. Lee asks if this is really that serious. The sergeant answers it's not just serious, it has direct relation to the very foundation of the NSLB, but the superiors believe that until someone puts a hand over her mouth, it's the captain, saying for her not to forget why she was relocated from intelligence. Zion is typing on his notebook, and a voice says that now that communications were restored, they still don't know how stable they are, so it will be brief. They can confirm the supposition that the prophetic association is connected with the rise of superhumans, but the current priority is capturing Code Zero. To assist him in the mission, the superiors decided to temporarily grant him maximum authorization. Any obstacle will only be a hindrance in the mission to save lives. With maximum authorization, he may exercise authority to remove any obstacles at his own discretion. Furthermore, regarding any delinquents he has at his disposal. In room 303, there's a hamburger that looks delicious. Maggie is eating. Dorothy says she didn't expect him to manage to develop food so quickly. Now they can make hamburgers, and it's all thanks to him. The protagonist says he's just applying the things he learned in agricultural college. Despite everything, there are all kinds of technological advances to thank. Until the old man notices something, comes closer with a drink, super excited. Perez says she found that while going through old belongings, Hertie was interested in vintage wine. So they froze one for him. Josh thanks, and the old man pours the tequila into the glass. After pouring the tequila into the glass, the lime is cut in half. The old man puts the salt, the lime, and the glass with the drink for Lin to hold, and the protagonist asks what this is. Josh replies that it's the real traditional way to drink tequila, the only way. It's a gift for his savior, and being able to enjoy such delicious treats is all thanks to him, the god of agriculture. Mo says not to mind that, but it would be rude to refuse, so if he doesn't mind. The protagonist licks the salt, drinks the tequila, and then bites the lime. The old man asks if the doctor would like to try, since it's a specialty of his hometown and it's quite strong. The doctor replies that she smokes but doesn't drink. Perez says they haven't seen Corbin. They answer that it's his shift today. Dorothy says in that case she'll take his share. Lynn says let him go instead. He doesn't want to cause trouble for her. Perez says it's fine and she can do it. Meanwhile, they're being watched. Outside, Zion is armed and tells everyone to get ready. They'll check communications again, and Alpha is testing. The sergeant says it's all good and over. HQ here, poppies, and asks if Bravo and Delta are on the line. The officer says Bravo is here. The corporal says Delta is here too. The captain says to leave communications with his daughter. Rhodes says he's getting static from him and a bit from Lee, maybe needs to adjust that. The officer says it's fine and to get on with it. The corporal asks about static. The sergeant adjusts the radio and says it's fine. They switch to the personal channel. The captain asks what she's hiding, and she asks if they really need to resort to such heavy-handed methods, and says Code Zero doesn't seem that dangerous, and she has a hunch that businessman kid is hiding something from them. The officer says he knows those who worked for Central Intelligence developed a special instinct, and he's well aware of what she's planning to do. And he has his suspicions too, and the superiors definitely have their own agenda, but as captain of this squad, he doesn't want anything to happen to him. However, even after saying that, he knows it's not enough to stop it, so all he says is, be careful. Rhodes says he finished his adjustments and they'll start this operation. Later, inside the building, a voice asks if he has a daughter. While Josh drinks the tequila, he says he had his own dream of starting a family despite everything, but he hasn't seen her in 20 years. And she must be about the same age as the doctor. Who knows how she's holding up when it's like this out there? Joe says he shouldn't drink so much because he's injured. The old man starts crying and says he failed as a father. The protagonist thinks this is bad and wonders if he's drunk. Josh holds the doctor's hand and calls her Juana. Joe looks surprised and wonders about Juana and if it's a coincidence, while the old man holding her hand says he's a useless father. He failed her and her mother. The doctor, confused, asks what he's talking about, and Josh keeps crying while begging for forgiveness. Lynn thinks that if it weren't the end times, at this very moment they would look like a normal family. Then the light goes out. Mo stays alert, wondering if the power went out. Joe, suspicious, thinks something is wrong. Josh walks and says so they've been reduced to this. The protagonist asks where he's going. The old man takes out a blade and unsheathes it. Then, outside, Zion says it's stuck, like he said. The corporal asks if his spy is really trustworthy. The captain says they'll have to pay to see. Then, they manage to open. Lee says it's open, so that's the maintenance entrance. The officer says they're going in. Then, they reach the 3rd floor. The sergeant says to turn on the body cams because she needs eyes in the jungle. The secret agent says they'll split as planned and protect the civilians first. That's the priority. And remember, there are only 3 there, so make sure to cover each other and spare the honorifics there. They walk looking around and someone in a mask watches them from above. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new content. Thank you.